HOA tried seizing my truck, didn't expect my FBI-trained wife to take them all down barehanded. The sun was a relentless tyrant that summer, baking our little suburban street in Serenity Hills until the asphalt shimmered like a mirage. Our neighborhood, a cookie-cutter grid of manicured lawns and beige siding, was the kind of place where people waved politely but whispered viciously. The HOA Homeowners Association, or as I called them, the Harmony-obsessed alliance, ruled with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove. Their decrees were law: no unapproved mailboxes, no overgrown hedges, and absolutely no vehicles parked on the street overnight. That last rule was the spark that lit the fuse of the wildest day of my life. I'm Jake Carter, a mechanic with a penchant for fixing things cars, mostly, but sometimes people's messes too. My pride and joy was a 1978 Ford F-150, cherry red, with a chrome grille that gleamed like a movie star's smile. I'd restored her myself, late nights in the garage with grease under my nails and classic rock blaring. She was more than a truck. She was a time capsule, a reminder of simpler days when my dad and I would tinker under the hood together. But to the HOA, she was an eyesore, a hulking violation of their pristine aesthetic. The trouble started with a letter slipped into our mailbox like a venomous snake. Dear Mr. Carter, it read in crisp, condescending font. Your vehicle violates Section 3.2.1 of the Serenity Hills HOA Covenant. Remove it from the street by 8 a.m. tomorrow, or it will be towed at your expense. I laughed it off at first. Tow my truck? Over my dead body. I figured I'd move her to the driveway for a day or two, let the HOA's blood pressure settle, then park her back on the street. But my wife, Emily, had other ideas. Emily was a force of nature, a woman who could make a grizzly bear back down with a glance. She'd spent 10 years with the FBI, working cases that would turn my stomach to jelly: undercover ops, hostage negotiations, the works. She retired when we got married, trading her badge for a quieter life, but the steel in her spine never softened. When she read the HOA's letter, her hazel eyes narrowed, and a slow, dangerous smile curved her lips. They want to play hardball, she said, cracking her knuckles. Let's see how they like a real fight. I should have known then that things were about to spiral into chaos. The next morning, I woke to the sound of a tow truck's diesel engine growling outside. I bolted to the window, still in my boxers, and saw a flatbed idling in front of our house, its driver a burly guy with a mullet consulting a clipboard. Behind him stood Karen Withers, the HOA president, in all her khaki-clad glory. Karen was the kind of woman who'd report you for a weed in your lawn and then smile at you over the fence like she hadn't just stabbed you in the back. Her blonde bob was as sharp as her tongue, and her clipboard was her scepter. Jake, Emily called from downstairs. Get out here. We've got company. I threw on a shirt and stumbled outside, where Emily was already on the front lawn, arms crossed, staring down Karen like a hawk eyeing a mouse. The tow truck driver looked caught between boredom and unease, clearly not paid enough for whatever was brewing. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered, sipping coffee and whispering, their phones poised to capture the drama for the neighborhood group chat. Mrs. Withers, Emily said, her voice calm but laced with venom. Care to explain why you're trying to steal my husband's property? Karen's smile didn't waver, but her eyes flicked nervously to the tow truck. It's not stealing, Mrs. Carter. It's enforcing community standards. That vehicle is a blight on Serenity Hills. The board voted unanimously to have it removed. Unanimously? I snapped, stepping forward. You didn't even give us a hearing. Karen waved a manicured hand. The rules are clear, Mr. Carter. You've had ample warning. Now, step aside, or we'll involve the authorities. Emily laughed a sharp, dangerous sound that made the tow truck driver flinch. The authorities? Sweetheart, I was the authorities. And you're not touching that truck. The crowd murmured, phones tilting closer. Karen's smile faltered, but she doubled down. This is your last warning. Move, or I'll call the sheriff. That's when things took a turn for the absurd. Before Emily could respond, a new voice cut through the tension like a foghorn. Oh, for heaven's sake, Karen, give it a rest. We all turned to see Mrs. Delaney, the neighborhood's resident eccentric, hobbling down her driveway. At 82, she was a wiry bundle of defiance, with a shock of white hair and a penchant for wearing mismatched socks. Nobody knew much about her, except that she'd lived in Serenity Hills since it was built and had a collection of garden gnomes that rivaled a small army. She leaned on her cane, glaring at Karen. "You HOA types think you own this place. That truck's got more character than your entire board put together." The crowd gasped. Karen's face turned the color of my truck. "Mrs. Delaney, this doesn't concern you. It concerns me when you're bullying my neighbors." Mrs. Delaney snapped, thumping her cane for emphasis. "Back in my day, we didn't let petty tyrants run our lives. You want that truck gone? You'll have to go through me first." I exchanged a glance with Emily, who looked torn between amusement and respect. The tow truck driver, clearly regretting his life choices, muttered something about a schedule and started unhooking the tow cables. Karen, however, wasn't backing down. She pulled out her phone, dialed, and barked, "Sheriff's Department? I need immediate assistance at 1423 Maple Drive. We have a non-compliant resident obstructing an HOA action." Emily's eyes gleamed. "Oh, this is going to be fun." The sheriff arrived 20 minutes later, a lanky guy named Deputy Harris who looked like he'd rather be fishing. He took one look at the scene, Karen with her clipboard, Emily with her arms crossed, Mrs. Delaney brandishing her cane like a sword, and me standing there like a deer in headlights inside. "What's the problem here, folks?" Karen launched into a tirade about community standards and property values. Emily countered with a calm, surgical dissection of the HOA's overreach, citing legal precedents I didn't even know she knew. Mrs. Delaney chimed in with a rant about kids these days and how Karen's generation had no spine. The crowd ate it up, their phones recording every word. Deputy Harris rubbed his temples. "Look, unless there's an actual crime here, I can't do much. Mr. Carter, can you move the truck to your driveway for now?" I nodded, eager to de-escalate. But Emily wasn't done. "Not so fast," she said, stepping closer to Karen. "You think you can bully us with your little power trip? Let's make this interesting. If I can prove your HOA's rules are unenforceable, you back off. Permanently." Karen scoffed. "And how do you propose to do that?" Emily's smile was pure predator. "Give me 24 hours. I'll dig up every dirty secret your board's been hiding. You're not the only one who can play hardball." The crowd erupted in whispers. Deputy Harris looked like he wanted to disappear. Mrs. Delaney cackled and thumped her cane again. And Karen, for the first time, her smug facade cracked, revealing a flicker of fear. That night, Emily turned our dining room into a war room. She pulled out her old FBI laptop still encrypted to hell and back and started digging. I brought her coffee and tried to keep up as she muttered about public records, tax filings, and something called easement violations. I didn't understand half of it, but I knew one thing. Karen had no idea what she'd unleashed. By morning, Emily had a dossier thick enough to choke a lawyer. The HOA, it turned out, wasn't just petty, they were shady. Karen and her board had been skimming dues for years, funneling money into community projects that never materialized. There were forged signatures on contracts, backroom deals with landscaping companies, and even a shady connection to a real estate developer who wanted to buy up half the neighborhood for condos. Emily's FBI training had taught her how to follow the money, and she'd followed it straight to Karen's doorstep. But the real twist came from an unexpected source, Mrs. Delaney. While Emily was buried in her research, I went to thank the old lady for her support. She invited me jing-jing. The sun scorched Serenity Hills like a dragon's breath that summer, turning our suburban street into a shimmering oven. The neighborhood was a grid of identical lawns and beige houses, where smiles were mandatory but gossip was currency. The Serenity Hills Homeowners Association HOA, or as I called them, the Harmony-obsessed alliance reigned supreme, their rulebook thicker than a Bible and twice as dogmatic. No unapproved mailboxes, no overgrown shrubs, and absolutely no vehicles parked on the street overnight. That last one was my undoing. I'm Jake Carter, a mechanic who loves fixing things cars, mostly, but sometimes life's messes too. My pride and joy was a 1978 Ford F-150, cherry red, with chrome that gleamed like a Hollywood grin. I'd restored her myself, late nights in the garage with grease-stained hands and Springsteen on the radio. She wasn't just a truck. She was a memory of my dad, of simpler days under the hood. To the HOA, though, she was a blemish on their perfect canvas. It started with a letter, slid into our mailbox like a viper. "Dear Mr. Carter," it read in smug, pristine font. Your vehicle violates Section 3.2.1 of the Serenity Hills HOA covenant. Remove it by 8 a.m. tomorrow, or it will be towed at your expense. I chuckled, thinking I'd park her in the driveway for a couple days, let the HOA cool off. But my wife, Emily, had other plans. Emily was a hurricane in human form, a former FBI agent who'd faced down mobsters and terrorists without blinking. 10 years in the Bureau had forged her into steel, and though she'd retired when we married, her edge never dulled. She read the letter, her hazel eyes narrowing, and cracked her knuckles with a grin that promised war. "They want to play dirty," she said. "Let's give them a fight." I should have known we were headed for chaos. The next morning, a tow truck's diesel rumble woke me. I stumbled to the window in my boxers and saw a flatbed parked outside, its driver a mullet giant checking a clipboard. Beside him stood Karen Withers, HOA president, in khaki capris and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Karen was the queen of passive aggression, her blonde bob as crisp as her clipboard, her weapon of choice. "Jake," Emily called from downstairs. "Get out here. We've got guests." I threw on a shirt and ran outside. Emily stood on the lawn, arms crossed, staring Karen down like a lioness eyeing prey. The tow driver shifted uncomfortably, caught in the crossfire. Neighbors gathered, clutching coffee mugs and phones, ready to feed the drama to the group chat. "Mrs. Withers," Emily said, her voice a velvet blade. "Care to explain why you're stealing my husband's truck?" Karen's smile didn't budge, but her eyes twitched. "It's not stealing, Mrs. Carter. It's enforcing community standards. That monstrosity violates our rules. The board voted to remove it." "Voted?" I snapped. "Without a hearing?" Karen waved a manicured hand. "The rules are clear. Step aside, or we'll call the sheriff." Emily's laugh was a warning shot. "The sheriff? Honey, I was the law. You're not touching that truck." The neighbors gasped, phones tilting closer. Karen's smile wavered, but she pressed on. "This is your last warning." That's when the plot twisted. "Oh, for Pete's sake, Karen, enough." We turned to see Mrs. Delaney, the neighborhood's octogenarian rebel, hobbling down her driveway. At 82, she was a wiry spitfire with wild white hair and mismatched socks, her lawn a gnome army. Nobody knew her story, only that she'd been here forever and bowed to no one. She jabbed her cane at Karen. "You HOA tyrants think you own us. That truck's got more soul than your whole board." The crowd buzzed. Karen's face matched my truck's paint. "Mrs. Delaney, this doesn't concern you." "It does when you're bullying my neighbors." Mrs. Delaney thumped her cane. "Back in my day, we didn't let clipboard Nazis run our lives. Want that truck? Go through me." I glanced at Emily, who looked half amused, half impressed. The tow driver muttered about his schedule and started unhooking the cables. Karen, undeterred, whipped out her phone. "Sheriff's Department? I need assistance at 1423 Maple Drive. Non-compliant residents are obstructing HOA action." Emily's grin was feral. "This'll be fun." Deputy Harris, a lanky sheriff's deputy who'd clearly rather be fishing, arrived 20 minutes later. He surveyed the scene: Karen's clipboard, Emily's stance, Mrs. Delaney's cane, and me, a deer in headlights inside. "What's going on?" Karen unleashed a tirade about property values. Emily countered with a legal masterclass, citing HOA overreach and statutes I'd never heard of. Mrs. Delaney ranted about spineless kids and Karen's tyranny. The neighbors lapped it up, their phones immortalizing every word. Harris rubbed his temples. "Unless there's a crime, I can't do much. Mr. Carter, can you move the truck for now?" I nodded, ready to comply, but Emily stepped forward. "Not so fast. Karen, you think you can bully us? Let's make a deal. Give me 24 hours to prove your rules are bunk, and you back off. Forever." Karen scoffed. "How?" Emily's smile was pure predator. "I'll dig up every secret your board's hiding. You're not the only one who plays dirty." The crowd erupted. Harris looked ready to bolt. Mrs. Delaney cackled, thumping her cane. Karen's smug mask cracked, revealing fear. That night, Emily turned our dining room into a command center. Her old FBI laptop hummed as she dug into public records, tax filings, and easement laws, muttering terms I couldn't follow. I kept the coffee coming, awed by her focus. By dawn, she'd built a dossier that could sink a ship. The HOA wasn't just petty, they were crooked. Karen's board had been skimming dues, forging contracts, and cozying up to a developer eyeing our neighborhood for condos. Emily's bureau skills had traced the money right to Karen's door. But the real shock came from Mrs. Delaney. I went to thank her for her stand, and she invited me in. Her house smelled of lavender and old books, her gnomes glaring from every corner. Over tea, she dropped a bomb. She'd been a civil rights lawyer in the 60s, fighting segregation in courtrooms across the South. "Karen's kind," she said, eyes glinting. "I've faced worse. Your wife's got fired, Jake. Help her burn that HOA down." I stared, floored. Mrs. Delaney, our quirky neighbor, was a legal legend. It changed everything, like finding a lion in a lamb's pen. Armed with Emily's dossier and Mrs. Delaney's blessing, we called an emergency HOA meeting that evening. The community center was packed, neighbors spilling into the aisles, their curiosity thicker than the summer heat. Karen sat at the board's table, flanked by her cronies Bob, a realtor with a fake tan, and Linda, a yoga instructor with a permanent scowl. Their confidence was a thin veneer, cracking under Emily's gaze. I stood by the door, my truck safely in our driveway, watching Emily take the stage. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice carried like a general's. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "the Serenity Hills HOA has been lying to you." She laid out the evidence bank statements, forged signatures, emails to the developer, each revelation a hammer blow. The crowd gasped, whispered, then roared. Karen's face drained of color, her clipboard trembling. Bob tried to interrupt, blustering about misinterpretations, but Mrs. Delaney stood, cane raised like a gavel. "Sit down, Sonny," she barked. "I've sued bigger crooks than you." The room erupted in cheers, and I swear I saw Linda flinch. Then came the second twist. As Emily wrapped up, a man slipped into the room, unassuming in a gray suit and glasses. He whispered to Deputy Harris, who'd been hovering by the exit, and handed him a folder. Harris's eyes widened, and he approached the stage. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "this is Agent Reynolds, FBI. He's got something to add." The room fell silent. Reynolds took the mic, his voice clipped. "We've been investigating Karen Withers and this HOA for 6 months, thanks to an anonymous tip." He glanced at Mrs. Delaney, who winked. "Your evidence, Mrs. Carter, just sealed the deal. Ms. Withers, you're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud." The crowd exploded. Karen bolted for the door, but Emily was faster, blocking her path with a grin. "Going somewhere." 2 deputies cuffed Karen, her protests drowned by jeers. Bob and Linda slunk out, tails between their legs, as Reynolds promised further arrests. We'd won. The HOA was dismantled, its rules nullified. My truck was safe, and Serenity Hills felt free for the first time. That night, neighbors threw an impromptu block party, toasting Emily with beers and Mrs. Delaney with lemonade. I hugged my wife, prouder than ever, and thanked Mrs. Delaney, who just smirked. "Keep that truck shiny, Jake. It's worth fighting for." But victory was a fragile thing. 2 weeks later, the developer moved in, unopposed now that the HOA was gone. Karen's scheme had been a distraction. The real plan was to buy Serenity Hills cheap, bulldoze it, and build condos. Our neighborhood, our memories, were collateral damage. Emily fought in court, Mrs. Delaney by her side, but money talks louder than justice. By fall, half the houses were gone, including Mrs. Delaney's. She moved to a retirement home, her gnomes donated to a park, her fire dimmed but never extinguished. We sold our house before the bulldozers came, moving to a rural plot where my truck could roam free. Emily framed the HOA's letter, a trophy of our fight, but her eyes held regret. "We won the battle," she said one night, staring at the stars, "but lost the war." I held her, thinking of Mrs. Delaney, of Karen's cuffs, of neighbors scattered like leaves. Was it right to fight for one truck when the cost was our home? Was Karen's downfall justice, or just revenge? I don't know, but I'd love to hear what you think. Where's the line between right and wrong when everything's at stake?